Good afternoon, members of Real Members Baptist Church. We are in Acts 27, verse 1 through 28, verse 16 today. And I'm not going to read all of this, but this is Paul setting for Rome. And we look at this and we see that he goes to Rome in three different stages here. We see he does what? He sails for Rome. He has a storm at sea, and the shipwreck that what? Leads him on Malta before he gets to Rome. So let us look at some of this and let us understand what application this has for us. And it says here, when it was decided that we should sail for Italy, this is verse 1 of chapter 27, it says, they delivered Paul and some other prisoners to a centurion of the Augustan cohort named Julius. And it goes on and on and on, and it says in verse 9, after much time has passed, the voyage was now dangerous because even the fast was already over. Paul advised them, saying, sirs, I perceive that the voyage will be with injury, and perceive that there be much loss, not only of cargo in the ship, but also of lives. But the centurion paid more attention to the pilot and to the owner of the ship than to what Paul said. And because the harbor was not suitable to spend the winter in, the majority decided to put out to sea from there on the chance that somehow they could reach Phoenix, a harbor of Crete, faced in both southwest and northwest, and spend the winter there. Now, there was a storm at sea, and we see here, he has the charge, and it was all over. And they had to escape and go to an island called Cadia, which is about 23 miles away from Crete, and a small island. And then in verses 21 through 26, so they didn't listen to Paul, and then the storm came, and there was a big danger. And he says this, since they had been without food for a long time, Paul stood up among them and said, men, you should have listened to me and not have set sail from Crete and incurred this injury and loss. Yet now I urge you to take heart, for there will be no loss of life among you, but only of the ship. For this very night there stood before me an angel of the God to whom I belong and whom I worship. And he said, do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand before Caesar, and behold, God has granted you all those who sail with you. So take heart, man, for I have faith in God that it will be exactly as I've been told. But we must run aground on some island. And it goes on. What's important with this, and I'm going to read all this, but they all survive. And it's good because they all survived, because if not, this centurion and those who were with him could have been put to death, or at least they would have lost their jobs. So the point is here, I want to make this point here, is that they were given sound advice. Paul said, eat, take heart, things will be okay. And this is something very important for us as Christians. Sometimes we think we're so spiritual that we don't do no earthly good. For you see, sometimes for people to listen to us, we have to do some physical good in order for them to listen to us on spiritual matters. We have to be practical. So, for example, you meet a homeless individual, you should take them to get food or eat a meal or something before you just sit there and say, you need Jesus. They do. But also give them food for the belly. Be practical. Be concerned about their physical well-being as well. Then we see there's a shipwreck, and they made it on land, and they're on Malta. And then in chapter 28, we move there. We see this account here. After we were brought safely through, we then learned that the island was called Malta. The native people showed us unusual kindness, for they kindled a fire and welcomed us all, because it had begun to rain and it was cold. Now these were, some translations say barbarians, or non-Greeks. They were not Greek speakers. They were people from Malta. They were not Greek speakers. So that's something very interesting. Why? God is using Paul to reach more than just the Jewish people who speak primarily Hebrew and Aramaic, and the primarily Greek speakers. He's reaching all types of people. And they were kind. When Paul had gathered a bundle of sticks and put them on the fire, a viper came out because of the heat and fastened on his hand. When the native people saw the creature hanging from his hand, they said to one another, "No doubt this man is a murderer, though he has escaped from the sea. Justice has allowed him not to live." So justice was personified in a god or goddess, and that would have been a snake. And so they thought that he was a murderer and he was going to get his just reward. But it says in verse 5, he, however, shook off the creature into the fire and suffered no harm. They were waiting for him to swell up or suddenly fall down dead. But when they had waited a long time and saw no misfortune come to him, they changed their minds and said that he was a god. Now in the neighborhood of that place were lands belonging to the chief men of the island, or you could say the chief, the head honcho, however you want to say that, named Publius, who received us and entertained us with hospitality for 3 days. It happened that the father of Publius lay sick with fever and dysentery. This is something that was very serious at the time, as it is in much of the world today. In America, it might not be too serious, but if you're in a third world country where most people make like $500 or $600, it can kill people or take several months to get over. And I'll tell you this, I've had dysentery being overseas. It's not fun at all. And Paul visited him and prayed, and putting his hands on him, healed him. And this is very important because this was a very deadly combo back during this time. Many people died from it if they did not. Many times it took, again, months to get over, and many of them were not the same afterwards. And when this had taken place, the rest of the people in the island who had diseases also came and were cured. They also honored us greatly, and when we were about to sail, they put on board whatever we needed. Then he arrives in Rome, and the Christians meet him. And tomorrow will be in verses 17 through the end of the book of Acts. But I want to say there's some things we can learn from this. Number one, we should be practical when we do ministry. Help people in their needs. Number two, when God gives us the opportunity to help people, like when he held him, it should be because we want to do things. Whether you think that people have the gift of healing or not, it's not for them to gain material gain. It's for them to help people and for people to hear the gospel. That's what happened. He preached the gospel to them, and he did something practical. Number three, Paul always did ministry to someone that he cared about. And this is very important for us. He didn't stop ministering to people just because they were different. We have people, there will always be people that we may not like. There may be people that we may disagree with. And there might be people hard to love, but we are called to love them as Christians. And we, as Christians, should not discriminate against people because of their race, creed, color, or whatever. But that happens, and it always will happen, and we're going to have to deal with that. And as Christians, we should take the gospel to all nations, all people, all creeds, all groups. It doesn't matter if we're the same as them or not. The gospel is for every single individual. Thank you for listening. Have a good day. Bye.